Be so different, you no longer have competition. Do what no one else is doing, and you will always stand out.
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives? That's because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching or group training for the team. On this podcast, you will hear insights and perspectives from communication experts from around the world. I'm thrilled today to introduce my guest to you, Roz Usheroff. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Roz. 1, she is the founder of the Usheroff Institute, whose core mission is to help your people discover and understand their unique talent and embrace their leadership capabilities that lead to both personal and corporate profitability. Get that word out there, Georgie. And 2, she is also host of the Roz Usheroff podcast that is designed for professionals who want to enhance their leadership presence, personal brand, and career trajectory by developing executive presence. The mysterious executive presence. That is communication, image, and credibility so they can stand out while staying authentic, resilient, and relevant. And 3, Roz loves to travel the world on business. In fact, at one year's conclusion, American Airlines shared the news that if Roz were an astronaut, she would have orbited the Earth 3 times that year. Roz Usheroff, so glad to have you on the podcast. Welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you so much, George. It's a pleasure to reunite with you. I believe we go back, do I want to say this, at least 25 years?
At least 25 years, yes. We've known each other over that time, and we've from time to time been in contact and marveled at each other's journey along the way, and I think we've been doing some good at the same time. Good for people, in particular around how people communicate and get along with other people and build their careers, build their businesses. Roz, I'm curious about the work you do now, helping leaders with their presence, this mysterious thing we call presence. It's hard to define. My first question is, what inspired you to take on this challenge and this journey?
Lots of things. I was trying to identify what were defining moments in my career where I saw the opportunity to really take what I most love, which is branding, and make it bigger. So it goes back to when I began my career. I had the privilege of having my first management position with a gentleman by the name of Joe Mimran. At the time, he was opening up Club Monaco stores in Toronto. Right now, he also has Joe Fresh, which he aligns with Loblaws, etc. He's also an investor on CBC's Dragon Den. But I learned a lot about branding from Joe, and I call him a genius visionary entrepreneur. And he taught me about branding and becoming a leader in your field in a very simplistic but very sophisticated manner. He created the whole concept of branding in terms of clothing, turning retail into a lifestyle. And it was all about, George, visual display, making clothes look expensive and putting groupings together, and also aligning the location, the demographics with the type of store. So Queen Street was very trendy. I was fortunate to manage the Hazleton Lane store, which was more boutique-y. In London, then he created a store that looked like a Georgian townhouse. So he was able to understand who his market was, what they wanted, and he fed into their self-esteem, helping them to feel really good about themselves when they walked out of the store. So he created an experience. So fast forward, after I worked with Joe for a year, I was very ambitious. I went to work for a company called Ralph Lauren, and about a year and a half later, I believed I was doing a really good job, although I never felt connected to the look of Ralph Lauren. However, it paid my bills. So one day, the president of Louis Dreyfus called me into his office and said, Roz, you're doing a great job, but we're firing you. And I thought, what? And it was like, oh my God, I couldn't imagine getting fired, how embarrassing and humiliating. And I said, can I ask you why? And he says, well, you just don't fit in. Now, the truth of the matter is, George, I didn't fit in. I didn't look good in Ralph Lauren clothes at the time. They were dirndl close to the floor. I don't know if you recall, but I'm really short. I would trip going up and down the stairs, etc. But what ended up happening as a result of him firing me, it made me realize that I didn't fit into the culture, and I was not being who I am. I wasn't honoring my authenticity. So I decided to open up my own company, went back to University of Toronto, took a degree in small business, psychology, I did the works, I checked out competition. I was going to brand people. And I knew what my competition had for breakfast, lunch, dinner. It was obsessive. I went back to Joe Mimran and I said, Joe, here's what I'm doing. And he looked at me and he said, you've done everything right, especially educating yourself, but you've wasted 6 months checking out your competition. I go, why? Isn't it important to know who your competition is? He said, Roz, be so different, you no longer have competition. Do what no one else is doing, and you will always stand out. That's been my mantra. How do you differentiate yourself by being your authentic self? And how do you stand out but yet fit in? Because obviously, Ralph Lauren, I didn't fit in, and the decision was right to let me go. I didn't have the confidence at that point to say, this is not good for me either. I'm not bringing the best of me to other people. So that's where I began my real passion. And I'm grateful to Joe Mimran. I'm grateful to many people along the way that guided me, because I really believe whatever it is that you do today, it's essential to have mentors. And I look at mentors as people who have the wisdom you have not yet achieved, asking for help, especially now with all the turmoil and uncertainty because of AI. It's so important to reach out to people. And it doesn't mean you have to necessarily follow their advice, but thinking that you know it all. I know that right now there's so much that I don't know. And that's what gives me the excitement and the passion to move forward.
And Roz, thanks for putting that experience of being fired in a positive light, because I imagine at the time you didn't see it as positive, and I can speak from my own experience. I remember the first job that I was fired from. I was devastated, and it was like, this doesn't happen. This can't happen to me. How can they do that? And the reality is that I hated the job. I totally didn't. I thought I just needed work. I had to work and make money and prove something to somebody else, but apparently I didn't pay attention to what was good for me. So yes, it starts with paying attention to what's best for you and being your best self, not, and as you pointed out, not trying to fit into Ralph Lauren clothes if it just doesn't work for you, and it might not work for me either.
Not the dirndl skirts, for sure.
And
Fortunately, his style is much nicer today. I do love his style.
And Joe Fresh. Now, it never occurred to me. Now, it's funny. I've seen the brand Joe Fresh, and it didn't occur to me that there was a real Joe Fresh behind that brand.
Right,
And
right.
and that makes it, now that makes it more real when we know there is a person behind the brand, not just a name that somebody tagged on. And what did you learn? What was the best lesson that you got from Joe Mimran about your personal brand? What did he say that made you go, oh, wow, I've been doing it wrong and he's right. I need to pay attention to this.
I think what I learned from Joe specifically, you have to be true to yourself. You have to also think about when you're creating value, it can't be for you, it has to be for your customer. But really know who your customer is and be able to adapt and flex your style of communication based on your customer's needs. Don't sell them what you want them to buy, sell them what they need to have based on who they are. So customization, individualization, showing the uniqueness of what you do a little differently. What I learned about him just from the selling perspective is, in terms of sales, and that's not what I teach, but I feel that we sell every single day, is you really need to look at what's going on in the world today and what are your customers' fears, what are their dangers that they're concerned about. And to sell just because you're a great salesperson, is that going to bring long-term success to your relationship? Is it going to be loyalty? Is it complementing your reputation if it's just a numbers game?
Fears. You mentioned fears, and that's something that we probably don't recognize and talk about enough because we like to. Have you ever met someone who says, "Nothing's. I'm not afraid of anybody. I'm not afraid of anything." Really? Then you're lying. I think because we all have fears, and fears are an important part of how we are motivated. Your clients, what might be some of their fears?
Just right now, I don't believe that we know what's going to happen tomorrow. The speed of the complexity of AI understanding, and it's really impacting on leaders today. And what I really appreciate is when leaders say, I really don't know, but we're going to figure it out, obviously. But there's something, and I don't know if you've heard the terminology, it's most interesting. It's called quiet quitting, move now to quiet cracking. What does that mean? It's a phenomenon where people aren't quitting. In fact, they're concerned but holding on to their jobs. And I think there's been some statistics saying that of the 60% of jobs out there today, of the work that they do, 30% will be taken over by AI. So how do you stand out and be relevant? But the quiet cracking, it's a phenomenon where employees continue their work, but underneath they're disengaged, they're losing faith, they no longer feel part of the future. And what makes employees, I believe, feel that there's opportunity in their companies to stay and feel satisfied is when the work that they do is meaningful, when they're given the recognition and acknowledgement that they do have the opportunity to make a difference, and when they see that they're getting developed. But the leaders today, and you can't blame leadership today, they're so involved in trying to figure out from the complexity of it, what needs to be automated, who do we get, unfortunately, who needs to go. And I know that Amazon laid off perhaps 12,000 people last week. So there's a fear factor that everybody is concerned about. And we have to be able to turn fear into opportunity. We have to have the right mindset. We have to figure out, I think for everyone, whether you're a leader, mid-level management, entry level, how do you differentiate yourself? What is it about what you do that could engage in making a bigger difference in the company? How do you align with AI? How do you make AI not the enemy, George, but how do you make AI your co-partner, your co-pilot, your administrative assistant? Because AI is going to get the work done much faster than we could ever. But what we had that AI doesn't have, we have heart. AI doesn't have a heart. We have emotional intelligence. We have the ability to feel. We could put context around what needs to be done. AI is going to be the deliverer of our services, but we're going to be the one that brings it to light, brings it to people in a human way. So human connection is essential for anyone that wants to lead today. Am I sounding like I'm going on and on? I get
No,
on
no,
a
no,
road.
and I appreciate what you say about AI because it's curious that in the past month, I think I've attended two programs, two seminars on AI, and we heard from different CEOs on what they're seeing. You emphasize that what AI doesn't have is heart, emotion,
The
emotional
soul.
intelligence, and what can we do? What can leaders do for their teams? One, to recognize the human aspect, and two, to help people better embrace and develop what makes them human.
I think what's really important is for leaders to allow their people to find their way, but to be able to have a dialogue, have conversation on where they believe they can make the greatest impact. A lot of times people are in jobs, but they're not really thriving because it's not their passion. So I think coaching becomes really, really important. Sitting down with your people and being able to guide them to make a bigger difference. Because once you get rid of the automation, you don't have to do the tedious stuff. There's opportunity for such innovation. So leaders have to inspire their people to innovate. They have to give them permission to have a voice. And a lot of leaders still go in the old-fashioned way, like, I've got an idea, here's what it is, but I'd like your thoughts. Really? You don't really want my thoughts. And leaders are going so fast that sometimes they're missing what's really going on in their culture. So leaders have to build a strong culture where people feel significant more than ever. It's all, George, about the human connection. And we should have a podcast just on this very topic because there's so much to go through. But that's the core. How are you connecting with your people? How are you painting the picture for the future when you don't know what the future is going to look like? You know, you could say there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or you could say there's an oncoming train. Which route are you taking? Are you panicking as a leader, or are you expanding as a leader? Are you inspiring, or are you dictating?
And Roz, you mentioned innovation, and I found it enlightening that one of the statements that I heard at one of these AI events that I attended was that AI doesn't innovate. AI simply looks at the data from the past and it predicts a future based on the average of that data. AI can't innovate. It can't create new. We need people to create new, to change the setting, to come up with totally new ways of doing things. AI isn't going to do that. Once we create the new one, the AI can help us be more efficient, perhaps, but it's not going to create the innovation.
I wanted also to suggest that's really important or emphasize creating psychological safety because there are going to be people on all levels that are going to be able to just catch on and see things and if they have a voice, then anything is possible. But if they feel shut down, if they don't feel that it's safe to speak out, it's going to stop companies from truly being successful.
Roz, where does the concept of executive presence fit within this world of AI and changing economies and massive layoffs? Where does executive presence fit in there, and how does it make people better?
Let's first eliminate what it isn't or what it used to be. How about this? What it used to be. You know, it used to be going in a room and, you know, it's about polish, presence, poise, everything that you have, George. And I listened to your podcast on first impressions and I'm thinking, okay, this is so good. You hit the nail on the head. But what's important is it's a little bit different today. It goes deeper than just your presence and the way you speak and the way you carry yourself. And it really goes into emotional intelligence. And it's really about how people feel around you. And it's not commanding a room, George, it's connecting with it. And I believe that leaders who stand out right now, they're not projecting authority, they're projecting authenticity. People want to follow people that they trust. So if I look at Sylvia Hewlett's I guess her research, and she talks about gravitas. And so I talk about it in a different way. I call it more the core of leadership confidence, how you act and why it counts. How are you responding under pressure, under uncertainty? People take cues from your composure. And how are you being decisive? Are you owning it? And again, leading with empathy and conviction. Again, I'm going to reinforce psychological safety, but I want to also add something, having charisma. And this is really interesting because everyone has different opinions of what is charisma. Is it fake? Is it artificial? Is it real? Are you born with that? And I was researching charisma, and it's an interesting word because in the Greek, it's referred to as a gift. How's that? So it's a natural charm that draws people in. And it's what you use on your podcast. I've watched a lot of your podcasts, and you have this natural gift. It makes people want to talk and share and be vulnerable with you. So charisma is your chemistry. It's that invisible spark that makes other people feel seen and valued. It's uplifting. And you don't have to be an extrovert to have charisma. You could have quiet charisma. And I've seen a lot of people with it. It connects people. Have you ever met someone where instantaneously you feel you know them? It's because they've created that connection through their charisma. So that's how I see executive presence. It's also influence. It's about a continuity between what you say and how you say it. So how you communicate, being clear to your point, not being long-winded, which I think this answer is becoming. And then it's body language and appearance. And I do tell people that you don't have a second chance to make a first impression. George, years ago, I used to come into a training program and I would go right into content because I didn't want to waste their time. I remember working with PricewaterhouseCoopers in Toronto, and I thought I was doing a great job because they were so busy. And I was described as Count Dracula's bride, which was horrible. We used to give out evaluations that they would write right there. So I didn't know who the person was because I would have looked for them and say, "What do you mean I'm Count Dracula's bride?" But I was just so cold. Someone else called me an ice queen in another evaluation. So it's about approachability. Appearances, you said in one of your podcasts, it's a smile. It's got to be sincere. It's got to be able to transfer to someone. My energy and my demeanor is going to impact on the audience that I'm with. So I've learned the hard way not to try to be perfect. In fact, when I've made mistakes, people have liked me better. When I've tripped in front of a group, I've had stories that are horrific, but I lived through them because people related to me, because we're all not meant to be human beings that are perfect. So it's about alignment between who you are and how you appear. So there you go.
And you're right, so true about people will forgive your flaws because when you make a mistake or you exhibit a flaw and you are comfortable with it, as opposed to trying to hide it, saying, don't look at that. But when you recognize your flaws, people now see, whoa, they're human,
Yes.
imperfect, just like me. And we spend too much of our time trying to pretending to be perfect because that's how we've been taught or trained. You've got to be
Right.
perfect. And you can't have flaws. You failed the exam. You don't pass go. Well, you know what? There's lots of imperfect people who have done very well, and that's something that we have to get comfortable with. And it's not that we shouldn't try to improve ourselves, but we simply have to recognize we're gonna make mistakes. We're going to trip. We're going to stumble, whether it's getting to the front of the room to stand up and speak to people and we stumble or we drop something or we spill our coffee. We got to go, oops, there I go. Oops. And, and just recover and move on. And people like to see that. Uh, Roz, what
George,
are,
could I just add one thing, though? It's
please do.
important in terms of first impressions and executive presence. One of the things that I want to reinforce, and as an executive coach, I often ask my clients to do this is to do some research on how you're perceived. Like, don't fix something that's not broken. Now, I knew from feedback that I didn't come across very warm or approachable. So I started to adopt something called host behavior, which I would recommend for anyone. It's been my mantra for, I guess, 25 years, is treating people as if they're a guest in your home, but going and asking for feedback in a way that you're going to hear it and you're going to receive what you want to, not like, how did I do? Oh, you did great, Roz. But if you say, hey, listen, I listened to this wonderful podcast, George, I'm self-promotional for you, the best series of podcasts by George Torok. But I wanted to know, I was encouraged actually to ask how I came across in terms of my executive presence or my demeanor or first impressions, and then ask the person a third party question. Is there anything you've heard through others that would be important for me to know? Anything you've heard that I could work on to best showcase my best personal brand? If you ask third party, it's easier for people to tell you, and it's usually their own opinion. I would, if they say, well, Roz, some people think you're aggressive, I wouldn't go, what do you mean I'm aggressive? It's not the way you answer. It's not good, right?
And Roz, two things there. One, I remember you mentioning that concept of host behavior
Long ago.
decades ago, and it's one of the lessons from you that has stuck with me when I attend events, to think about, okay, we're in my room, and these people here are my guests, and even though I'm a guest like everyone else, but yes, I remember that lesson, and two, brilliant idea to say, what have you heard from other people
Mm-hmm.
about me? So now you're not accusing them or making them feel bad for telling you what they really think.
Right. And asking a what question or how, what does that look like to you if they give you feedback? Or how would you suggest? Those are really good ways of digging deeper. What gets into the content and how gets into the action? I have a funny story to tell you. I was in a room with executives, and I was using an assessment tool called the Print, which I just love. And I went around the room and I said, how did you find it? And everyone said, oh, I love this. It was so wonderful, great self-analysis, self-awareness, whatever. My wife says it's me to the T and all this. And one guy said, it was a waste of my time and it sucked, pardon my language. And everyone's looking at me. This is the beginning of a training, which is like, wow, how's she going to handle it? And I thought, okay, Roz, don't let it be personal, not personal. Go into host behavior. And if you were a guest at your home and said about your food, what would you say? Which I don't cook anyhow, so it wouldn't be possible. and I looked at him and I said, well, first of all, can I tell you that I admire you? Because I went into host mentality. He's looking at me, well, let me know why. And I said, I admire you for your confidence and to be, or your vulnerability to be so open and transparent. And that was it. And I said, I hope you get value. And we moved on. But I wasn't lying because I was hosting. And I wouldn't be able to say that. That's not me. I'd be afraid to say that in public. But it was where he was coming from. So when someone tells you the truth, don't negate it. It's their perception. So host behavior is all part of executive presence.
And what helpful advice there. And yes, so in that case there, you were in effect attacked by this person with their words, and he and the rest of the room are all waiting to hear you, how
Yes.
you're going to respond, how you're going to defend yourself and make up some nonsense story about, and instead you took an entirely different approach, and you accepted his criticism, and you praised him at the same time. So he's got nowhere to
Yeah.
go. And so
Right.
whatever emotion, anger he was feeling at the time, or whatever he was trying to convey, was now deflated because there's no point in attacking you because you're not going to fight back.
Right. But George, I wasn't always like this. I would try to justify and try to give him every reason why this was going to be a wonderful training. Sometimes you have to know when to hold them, when to fold them, but making people wrong for what they feel or believe is a disaster to your personal brand. It's not going to build it in a positive way. Not everyone thinks the way you do, but honoring them for what they feel doesn't mean I agree with him. Obviously, I didn't. I teach it, but it was, I teach what I need to learn. That's how I say it, because there's so much. Every day I have such a joy and privilege to learn from talented individuals of all ages, from entry level right to CEO, and especially from you. The manner in which you talk to people is really a wonderful example of someone who naturally hosts, and you come from a spirit of wanting to give, and that's what we need to do today to make this world better.
Roz, for people who would like to learn more about you and your services, they can find you at your website, and the website is
Usheroff.com, Usheroff.com. Simple.
and you can find that link in the description below. Roz, as we prepare to wrap up, what have you seen are some of the mistakes that leaders might make? And if there's one, two, or three mistakes that you've seen that you could quickly tell them to stop doing this and what to do instead, what might be those mistakes and your corrective advice?
So let me give you 3 or 4 really quick ones. I think one of them is over preparing your content and under preparing for the audience, being so focused on a polished presentation. Remember, we talked about perfection, that they tune out of the people. They don't know who's in the room. They don't really care. They haven't done their research. That's number one. Number two, ignoring emotional intelligence in the room. If you walk into a meeting and you get a sense that something is going on, if you've got to read the room, you've got to feel their energy level. And if the energy feels off, maybe you need to just say, hey, I've just walked in here. Is there something I need to know before I move forward with my presentation? It's really important to know that. And speaking to show that you're an expert, and I've seen people do that where it's kind of obnoxious. I know you know what you're talking about, but how about including us in your content? I know you know everything, but when they get into how great they are, it's a turnoff. People want to hear that you're vulnerable, that you make mistakes, that you get up and you come back the next day and you're ready to try again. That you have the attitude. It's not what happens to you in life, it's what you do with what happens and how you have resilience. And the last this is the one, my real big pet peeve that I have learned, hopefully, to do better, is not to be an advice monster. And what that means is when people tell you a problem or a challenge, right away we're giving advice. And often it's not on the right topic. We have to have a conversation. We have to dig deeper and asking, so what else is a challenge? What else? And I remember having someone who they had an individual to put on a performance plan. And the CEO was saying, this is something you need to do. This is the level that you're at. You need to get rid of them, blah, blah, blah. And this guy couldn't do it. He just felt so responsible for helping this other person. And when I went through what's a challenge and what else, really asking him instead of giving him advice, it turned out that the person that the CEO wanted fired, his wife was terminally ill. I mean, it was such a sad story. So sometimes we don't really know what's on the surface underneath because we don't ask the right questions. So digging deep, that's the advice monster. So I try not to do that, but at home it's a little different. So George, I hope this was helpful.
Valuable advice. Yes. My guest today is Roz Usheroff, reminding you to be so different that you don't have competition. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.